Hello and welcome. In this explainer for your AMCU course, we're going to dive into the really complex story of immigration, identity, and diversity across the English-speaking world.
So let's kick things off with this really provocative question from a former British Prime Minister, Lord Rosebery. Now think about it. He said this way back in 1900, right at the peak of the British Empire. It gets right to the heart of a tension, a conflict really, between identity and race that has shaped Britain and its former colonies for more than a century. It's the perfect hook to get us started.
Okay, so where does this fit into your AMC program? Well, it's right at the center of Theme 2, Diversity and Inclusion, and specifically Axis 1, the plurality of cultures. By digging into these ideas, we're going to get a much richer understanding of the English-speaking world as it is today.
And this is our big question for today. This is what we're aiming to answer. As we go through this explainer, we're going to build that answer piece by piece, looking at the history and the challenges that these multicultural societies face right now.
And here's our roadmap. First, we'll tackle the myth of the British Empire. Then, we'll look at the very different paths Australia and Canada took. After that, we'll analyze some of the social divisions we see today, and we'll wrap up with some really practical skills to help you ace your assessments. All right, let's dive into our first section, this idea of a unified British Empire. You know, the question of who really belonged was, and still is, way more complicated than it might seem on the surface.
So on paper, this principle was actually pretty radical. Civis Britannicus sum. It basically meant that there was one single shared identity. So whether you were born in London, or Kingston, Jamaica, or Mumbai, India, you were a British subject. And that meant, legally, you had the right to move to the UK, the so-called mother country.
But, and this is a huge but, the reality was completely different. There was this unofficial but very real system called the color bar, which created a powerful racial hierarchy. And this wasn't just informal prejudice. It got written into law long before the post-war migrations. Just look at the 1925 order, which suddenly reclassified many black and Asian sailors who were British subjects as aliens in their own empire.
This timeline really tells the story of how that ideal was legally taken apart step by step. It starts in 1948 with an act that actually confirmed imperial citizenship. But then, look, just 14 years later, the 1962 Act brings in a voucher system, basically a work permit, to start restricting that right. The 1971 Act took it even further, creating this idea of patrial status, which gave preference to people with parents or grandparents born in the UK. And the whole thing culminates in 1981, when a new law just gets rid of the old imperial status altogether. The era of a single citizenship was over.
So, what's the most crucial point here? It's this fundamental redefinition of what it means to belong. British law changed completely. Citizenship, which was once based on where you were born, the right of the soil, or is soli, was replaced by a system based on your ancestry, the right of blood, or is sanguinis. And this, of course, legally privileged people with British-born family, creating a much more racialized idea of who could be British.
Okay, so that's the story in the UK, but what was happening in other parts of the English-speaking world? As the empire faded, countries like Australia and Canada had to figure out their own answers to these questions of immigration and identity. Australia's journey is just fascinating. It's a complete 180-degree turn. For the first half of the century, you had the explicitly racist White Australia policy. But after World War II, everything changed. There was this real fear of invasion, which led to a new, urgent slogan, populate or perish. This sparked a massive migration program that completely changed the face of the nation. Now, Canada took a totally different route. It was dealing with its own major internal divisions, right, between its English and French-speaking communities. So, it decided to make diversity its defining feature. It made bilingualism and multiculturalism official state policy, essentially saying, our national identity is our diversity.
So why does all this history matter now? Well, it's absolutely essential if you want to understand the deep social divisions we see today. These questions, who belongs, what defines us, they never went away. In fact, they are burning at the core of events like Brexit, which we're going to look at now.
To help us analyze these modern tensions, we can use a really influential idea from the journalist David Goodhart. He argues that the main political divide today isn't just left versus right anymore. It's between two groups with totally different ways of seeing the world, the anywheres and the somewheres.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting when you look at the numbers. The anywheres, the group whose values tend to dominate in media, culture, and politics, they only make up about a quarter of the population. The somewheres are a much, much larger group, at about half the country.
And this quote from Goodhart just nails his argument. He's saying that for a lot of somewheres, the Brexit vote was this rare chance to finally push back, to say stop to decades of rapid change that they felt was driven by the anywhere elite, on everything from immigration to globalization.
Right, let's switch gears and make all of this really practical for your AMC exams. One of the most important skills you need is the ability to build a clear, well-structured argument when you're analyzing any kind of document.
The method is actually super simple, but it's incredibly effective. Just think: idea, example, explanation. It's a three-step process. First, you state your point clearly. Then, you back it up with a specific piece of evidence from the document. And finally, and this is the key part, you explain how that evidence proves your point and link it all back to the main topic. If you follow this structure, your analysis will always be solid.
And of course, to express these ideas clearly, you need the right words. Make sure you are really comfortable with these key terms. You should be able to define them and use them correctly. Think of them as the essential tools you need to analyze these complex issues properly.
So, to wrap things up, let's pull all the main threads of our discussion together and think about why this debate is still so incredibly important today.
Okay, let's recap our key takeaways. What have we learned? We've seen that national identity isn't some fixed, timeless concept. It's a social and political idea that is constantly being built, challenged, and rebuilt over time. And that process is happening right now, shaping the societies we live in.
And so, I'll leave you with this final thought. It's a question that links directly to other themes in your AMC course, like power and representation. And it's a question that every single multicultural society in the English-speaking world is trying to answer right now. Thanks for watching.